And we are on. Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land and also on the podcast, wherever you're listening to this podcast. This is Jay Del Rey, and we're on Getting It Off Her Chest. And I have a beautiful, courageous woman with me today. Her name is Chara Caruthers. We met each other a couple of years ago now. Yeah. And we've stayed in contact through social media, which is awesome. And I just felt really called to talk to Chara today about Ayurveda. This is her specialty. And I've dabbled in it myself a couple of years ago. I studied it for about 3 months. And I absolutely loved it. It really resonated with me. But then I went off on lots of tangents, as I have on my journey. But I feel it's really relevant today. It seems to be a real synchronistic thing that's happened in the last couple of days. So I think the timing of this conversation is wonderful because we're going to be encompassing around the subject of self-love. And I understand that this is something that you have you are developing in the work that you do. So I might just hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself.
Sure.
And maybe start with how you got into doing what you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me on, first of all.
Yeah.
Really excited to be here having this conversation with you. I don't know if you know, but I had been sort of almost like we'd been connected before we actually met in person, but that's another story for another time. But it was really great that a couple of years ago when I did finally get a chance to meet you. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Chara Caruthers, and I am a yoga therapist, an Ayurvedic practitioner, and a women's wellness mentor. And the work that I do is around having people or teaching people and supporting people through the process of understanding what this Ayurvedic thing is, this lifestyle, this way of looking at the world, this way of looking at yourself, what it is, and helping them to incorporate it into their lives in a way that's meaningful and powerful and useful. So that's mostly what I do.
And how did you get into this?
That was right. Yeah. That was your question. So I started out as a corporate worker bee. I was an engineer in the corporate world for about 15 years. And as happens, I felt out of place from day one. But when you surround yourself with environments and work and even people, not to blame the people, but that aren't really suited for who you are, and these are things that I've learned kind of much later, you can feel it. It's tangible. It's palpable. And so for me, it resulted in burnout. It resulted in infertility. It resulted in just self-worth issues and challenges, and also just this feeling of really not knowing what I wanted, who I was or what I wanted to do in my life or anything. So it was a very disconcerting. In some ways, you think that, well, you're working in the corporate world, you're making lots of money, you're living in New York and London and all these great places, you should be feeling happy, empowered, juiced up at the top of your game. And yet for me, it was the complete opposite. And so I left all of that, which in itself was a journey and a challenge. And at the time that I left it, I didn't know what I was going to. I didn't know, but I knew that I had to get out of that environment in order to kind of find myself truly, or just even begin to experience myself truly. And so I did leave that and found yoga. Interesting, as so many do. Found yoga, and from yoga, Ayurveda. And that typically is the path for a lot of people with Ayurveda. Yoga and Ayurveda are very deeply connected. And so many people start, especially since yoga is kind of everywhere now, many people start on the yogic path, and then at some point, I often liken it to an onion. At some point, you peel through the onion enough, and then you find Ayurveda. And these days, it's happening a lot sooner, which is great, because there's folks like me and other folks out there talking about it and living it and having people understand what it looks like and what it feels like to embrace Ayurveda, which means really embracing yourself.
Wow, which is the big topic that, I kind of want to wrap this conversation around that topic of self-acceptance, self-love. I think it's huge. I mean, I'm 49 and I'm still working on it. I still haven't got it. I was reading Anita Moorjani's book, Dying to Be Me, yesterday, and opened up to this particular page where she talks about how she in her near-death experience, she discovered what it was that created the disease, the cancer, and it was her self-talk, her non-acceptance of herself, feeling wrong. It's a lot of what Peter Crone's work's all about too. So how do you feel that the Ayurvedic lifestyle, or what have you learnt? What can you tell us about how that helps on this journey, this path of bloody self-acceptance?
Well, okay, so first, let me just throw a few sentences out there about what Ayurveda is for anybody who doesn't already understand it or doesn't already know. So Ayurveda is a ancient system of health and healing. It's a lifestyle that focuses in two particular areas, one of which is healing of disease. So there are Ayurvedic doctors, hospitals, people who really do focus in on helping people heal from all manner of diseases. And the other part of Ayurveda, the other kind of leg, which is far more important, and there's a lot more emphasis placed around this, is prevention. So the Ayurvedic view is that between the time things start to go a little awry and the time that they start to manifest as an actual disease, there's a lot more time there than we think. And so we have a lot of space to potentially prevent disease from happening. Most of us do. Obviously, there's always exceptions, but most of us do. And so what that means, and this is the hardest thing, is that we have to love ourselves before any shit shows up. We have to love ourselves before the aches, the pains, the scratchy anything, something, the legs go crazy, whatever it is. And I think that's the challenge for people, because when we love ourselves truly, then we start to make choices for ourselves that are far more healthy. And so really what Ayurveda is about, and it's, if you ask anybody, they might say it's very complicated. There's this and there's that, and there's doshas and all the rest of it. But really, when it boils down to it, Ayurveda is about teaching us to love ourselves, about teaching us to understand our true nature, who we really are underneath all of this, how this body-mind functions, what its tendencies are, what disease paths it typically, it might be most likely to take. And then when we can see that out in front of us, we can start taking preventative measures. And it's simple stuff. For me, the biggest aha moment, what I really love about Ayurveda is you find all these aha moments in part because it's super, super practical. And it's inherent within us, this capacity for healing. We just have to be shown that we've got it for many people. So for me, the biggest light bulbs have been my relationship to things like cold weather, which is kind of crazy. You think, well, but for years suffered from crazy anxiety. I grew up in California where the weather was fantastic. And then once I left California, it went to a climate that was a little different, that got a lot colder in the winter, crazy anxiety, all kinds of skin issues, like all kinds of things that I just didn't recognize. Right. And I realized that I needed to prepare myself better, which is strange. Like most people think, well, of course you do, of course you need to do this. But when we don't really understand the connection between the temperature outside and what's going on in our heads, it often means that we don't understand the connection between what we eat and what's going on in our heads. Or we might not understand the connection between our relationships and what's going on in our bodies. So Ayurveda, I often say Ayurveda is like connecting the dots between our physical, mental, emotional experiences and our choices and our environment and all of these things. And so it's really helpful.
I was looking up because I did a little quiz online, and you probably have a much better quiz or whatever you do when you do consultations to find out what my dosha was. And I'm predominantly, and you even said this yesterday, you thought that I was Vata. Yep. So what really helped, I was reading the description of Vata and I was like, holy shit. Like, honestly, that just described my personality, my or everything that I kind of wasn't accepting about myself, to be honest, especially my energy, like it's quite, I can be quite energetic, and And I flipped from one thing to another, and I like variety. And I was kind of somehow making that wrong because I thought I had to fit into a particular kind of, I don't even know where that came from, but maybe it's all the social media or stuff. Well, they're doing that. Maybe I'm meant to be doing it this way, but hell no. And that
Yeah.
really helped reading that.
Huge.
Yeah.
That to me was huge as well. Well and
Mm,
truly, we live in a society, and if we even start to think about it, for most of us, from the moment we've come out of the womb,
mm,
there's a barrage of messages about what you should look like, how you should feel, what choices you should be making in your life, what work is worthy that you should be doing in your life. And so the challenge for so many of us is, if we don't fit that mold, which I have to tell you is basically everyone, if we
yeah.
don't fit that mold, we end up with self-worth issues.
Mm,
And we end up feeling less than, we end up feeling confused, we end up judging ourselves, just like you said, making ourselves wrong for life. And so for
yeah.
me, another thing that Ayurveda really gave me was this, this nudge, this push towards understanding who I am, just like you. I've had a number of different jobs, and also, always been easily distracted,
Yeah.
certain physical issues that that typically come up, all of these things. And for years and years and years, I just made myself wrong about it, or thought, my goodness, you can't get your shit together,
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Ayurveda really helped me understand, no, this is your true nature, love. Like, this is who you are. You've got
Yeah.
to embrace it. You have to understand what this looks like when it's out of balance, and you've got to understand what this looks like when it's in balance. And then
Yeah.
you focus your attention on trying to make sure that you stay closer to this balanced place version of you than this one. And don't worry about what's going on outside and around you. You just focus on you. And that's a
Yeah.
huge thing for so many people.
It is, isn't it? There's so
Yeah.
many distractions, like you said. So, I mean, it really comes down to knowing yourself better. And like when I read that, and I have been down this path before, but then I've kind of experienced, it's part of my nature too, wanting to experience all different types of modalities, especially
Yeah.
on this cancer journey. And so
Yeah.
I went down the raw, I went down the juicing fast, the water fasts.
Yeah.
Um, to experience, well, how does my body feel?
Mm.
Um, was that worth it? I think probably on some levels, in some degree, but I guess what I'm trying to find is that just that harmony within, and then finding, because I used to think that before I got into Ayurveda that it was just about food,
Yeah.
but there's a whole thing encompassing this kind of lifestyle that you're talking about. And I actually like warming foods. I actually love dal. It's one of my favorite foods to eat. And because it just feels like I'm nourishing myself and I feel warm and cozy. And then there's all this other, information out there. I think there's a lot of confusing information about what's on trend,
Yeah.
what's a good thing to do. But
For sure.
really it's finding out, is a water or a juice fast really good for my body? I don't know.
I honestly, I think you're doing it, you're going about it in the right way. The thing is, we have to have experiences in order to learn ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have to engage in these experiences with that as an intention. But
Mm.
often we engage in experiences with an intention of, this is my life now, or I'm going to fix something, or I'm going to fix myself.
Mm.
Whereas if we engage in our, experiences, whether it's our, explorations of food, or, anything really, if we engage in it from a point of view of learning ourselves, it's we gain something from it that can move us further, along our path, which is really a useful thing. And the thing that Ayurveda definitely teaches us, which can sometimes be frustrating, is that we are constantly changing. And so this
Yes.
process of we have to be almost constantly engaged in this process of becoming aware of ourselves, of knowing ourselves in this situation or that. Like, who am I today? What's
Yeah.
possible for me today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you just run through like a little snapshot of each dosha just to give
Yeah.
people a general sense? I think that's fun to kind of, for people to maybe identify with, oh, that sounds like me.
Absolutely. And the thing I think is really, most people, when they come to Ayurveda, they're really intrigued about this whole dosha thing. And
Mm.
honestly, what I've noticed over the years is that really speaks to our own curiosity to know ourselves. Like we really do. We want to see stuff and like recognize ourselves in it,
Yeah.
which is something I really love about Ayurveda because it kind of gives us that foundation. So I'll talk a little bit about what the doshas are.
Okay.
So Ayurveda, I sometimes think of Ayurveda as like a language or like a model for existence, right? For our
Mhm.
mind, body, and our relationship to it. So the doshas are kind of a way of describing what I'm going to get in trouble here, but what physics kind of gotten us to, which is this understanding that everything is energy,
Yeah.
everything. So if
Mm.
you imagine like whatever's running your cells and and all of those to stick together and create a certain type of this and whatever it is, all of that is just energy kind of lighting up different aspects of your being.
Mm.
So the ancients decided, well, right, let's try to figure out, because it seems like these energies act in different ways potentially. Let's try to figure out what these are. So they divided these. They decided that there were three types of energy. We call them
Mm.
functional energies or biological energies. Each of them has a function within the biological structure. Vata,
Mm.
the energy of movement. So if you think about anything that moves in your body, right? The air through your circulate or your respiratory system, the blood through your circulatory system. There's the idea that there's this energy that makes that happen. And this seems really simplistic, but it's a way of describing a complex system in a way that we can easily relate to it. And that to me is the foundation of you being able to choose and heal yourself. So
Yeah.
there's Vata. Pitta
Mhm.
is the energy of metabolization and transformation. So if you think of any metabolization that's going on in your body, which is happening at the tiniest level, at the smallest cells of your body, all the way through to your digestive, your actual digestive system, there's some fire in there that is driving those processes. And we call that pitta. And then
Okay.
kapha is the energy of cohesion and structure. So if you think about all the structure and the kind of the sticking together that happens in your body, right? So cells stick together and they create walls of your organs. They create bones, your bone structure. But then they
Mm.
also might stick together and create congestion somewhere in the body. Or they might stick together and create something slimy that helps to lubricate your joints. So that
Yeah.
gives you an overall sense of the energies and kind of what they do. So now let's talk about your dosha. So each of us has a specific combination of those three doshas. So we've all got them all, as you probably
Yeah.
recognize as of talking about that. But each
Yeah.
of us have a specific combination of each of those doshas that defines a lot about us. It defines what our bodies look like. Are we tall? Are we short? Are we naturally thin? Are we naturally, stronger and a little bit more potentially heavy set or sturdy? Do we have an athletic build? Do we have a natural tendency towards, you know, certain types of work or nurturing or traveling? So
Mm.
that's the way that the doshas actually help to define our experience of ourselves and living. So Vata, as I said, the energy of movement. And so folks who have a primary Vata dosha, like yourself and like me, I'm Vata Pitta.
Yeah.
Primary Vata dosha, it can show up in a number of different ways. I'm quite tall. I don't know if we've
Yeah.
been together. So I'm
Five
about
nine.
5'9". I'm over the average.
Yeah.
So Vata people might tend to be tall or actually really short, which is kind of interesting. Most people don't know that. Tall
Oh.
or really, really short. They might typically be light people. They might be, and by that I mean sort of thin, or I always think of like the bohemian girl who's running through the fields with the long hair and who's
Yeah.
super spindly. That's kind of the class, like you, Jay. That's kind of
Yeah.
the kind of the
Fiddly.
class Vata
Yes.
dosha. I'm just going to open my window really quick. Um,
Yeah.
so Vatas tend to be highly creative people. They tend to be people who like to move around, movers and groovers. They might have, and that might mean anything from physical movement, like traveling, to or dancing. A lot of dancers are Vata,
Mm.
or mental and emotional movement, like moodiness or like anxiety. And folks who have a predominant Vata dosha maybe have a tendency towards issues related to excess movement. So as I mentioned, anxiety, moodiness, as I said, they may, because they're so light, they may have issues with cold temperatures. Yeah. They also have tendencies towards dryness within the body. So things like constipation or dry skin, and then other things as well, pain, that sort of stuff. Even though you can't directly relate it, those sorts of things are typical of a lot of issues too. So let's talk quickly about Pitta. Pitta, as I mentioned, the energy of transformation. So Pitta tends to be quite contained, which is interesting, I suppose, but it's also hot. So the qualities of Pitta are sharp and intense, and there's a little bit of lightness to Pitta as well. And so Pitta folks typically are the type A personalities. There's an intensity there. There's a real focus there. They tend to be very charismatic folks, sometimes very athletic people. But then they have a tendency towards issues related to heat. So that could be things like infection, inflammation, ulcers, hypertension, but then also maybe some skin issues that are, typical for Pitta people or predominant Pitta. And then there's Kapha. So Kapha, as I said, is this energy of structure and cohesion. And Kapha folks, if you can just imagine somebody who's super grounded, who's very calm. I always call the Kapha people the earth mothers. So they're very calm, super nurturing. They make great carers and teachers, and nurses, that sort of stuff. But predominantly Kapha people have a tendency towards issues that are related to heaviness. So weight gain, depression, things like diabetes, hoarding is another kind of Kapha thing. You can imagine kind of wanting to kind of draw all this stuff in, but then also issues like edema or like swelling, or weight or water retention. And also I'm thinking of things like itching, like I'm getting into all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so you get a sense of like the typical kind of issues that are associated with each of them.
And then you find the ways of supporting people in where they can balance that. So for example, my Vata, I mean, obviously I need more Kapha going on, I guess, the groundedness.
Yeah, you got it. So for me, typically, I want to talk to people and have them understand kind of who they are naturally, because as I said before, we're constantly comparing ourselves to some crazy ideal, which in a lot of places looks a little more Pitta. It looks intense, and we live in a world that's kind of fast and intense. And the folks that we see in the media and in sports and at the heads of big companies, those folks are often very Pitta people. And so we look at that as some kind of crazy ideal. And, there are different ideals in different spheres, for modeling and various other places, Vata might be the picture. But regardless of what sphere of the world you're talking about, we're almost always comparing ourselves to someone else or some other quote unquote ideal. So what the work I do mainly is having people understand who they are. You're Vata. So let's talk about, you're going to naturally want to do a lot of stuff. You're going to naturally want to, easily be distracted. And so can you understand what your Vata looks like when it's out of control and what it feels like when it's a bit out of control? And then take steps to bring it back to that gorgeous, creative, kind of wanderlusty, like, enthusiastic and charismatic you, as opposed to the one who feels scattered and disconnected.
And, shiny bauble.
Yes, exactly. And lost or whatever. So it is about that self-acceptance, but it's also just about knowing kind of, and as we've been talking about, tuning in to learn who you are and what that looks like. And so you touched on it. The idea of creating balance is really about adding qualities that help to balance out your kind of out of control qualities. So if there's a sense of lightness and a lot of movement in your life that is pushing you in this direction of burnout or fatigue, or which is also a Vata issue, then you need to add some more heaviness, some more groundedness. So for Vatas, that can look like heavier foods. So staying away from that light and dry, and kind of scanty, juice fasts and various other things, raw food and things like that. And maybe choosing foods that are cooked, so that are warming and that are a little more grounding. But then also grounding your mind with things like routine, as opposed to just waking up every day going, I know. Exactly. I totally get it. And the funny thing is, I'm the same. Like as a Vata, I'm like, routine? No. But I've noticed if I can create routine in a way that lets me have a little variability in it, all of a sudden I feel a little bit more grounded. I feel a little bit more okay. I can be my best self within this beautiful structure. And I'm not going to rebel so much, or I might, have some routine a few days a week, and then one day is my free day where I can, go and whatever. So it's really just about finding what works. And what people have told me and what I found myself, simplest little changes can make the biggest differences. Like even just something as simple as giving yourself an oil massage, every day or every second day, or infusing a little bit of routine in your day. Simple things.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Yeah.
So I'll obviously leave links and everything for people to get in touch with you. But do you have like a consultation? How does it work with you? What do you normally do?
I do a lot of things. I focus my attention, one, on just general education. So I've got courses out there that are helping people to get started with Ayurveda by creating a routine that works for them. I've got, I do cleanses with people. Cleansing is a really big and important part of Ayurveda. So I do that every year. And then I also do consultations. And those are typically for folks who are maybe trying to manage some particular issue. Maybe they've got, I don't know, weight issues, or they might have digestion issues or something. And so I can work with them to help educate them and get them on a path that's going to help them. And then I've also got a membership program, which is about helping and to support people to live seasonally, which is another huge part of Ayurveda. I mentioned earlier the seasons, the weather, and how a huge impact. And I don't know what your experience has been of the weather. Every time I see you, you're always in some beautiful tropical place. And I think, that's exactly where she needs to be.
Well, yeah, I do, I guess. I don't like the cold.
Yes.
But I'm finding the heat this summer kind of, the humidity quite intense.
Yes. Yeah, it can be. Exactly. Well, it's good to understand, because I think you probably have a little bit of pitta in you as well. Just because you've got an intensity around the many different things that you do.
Yeah, I know.
And so that pitta might just be getting aggravated by the heat and the humidity. Same thing happens to me. I am, if the weather's just perfect, like for me, spring and the autumn are the best times. And then if it's too intense, like today, it's actually quite warm. And then I feel a little like, I don't feel like myself. So I also have this program that allows people to, supports people through living seasonally, which is, as I mentioned, a huge thing, because we're different people from season to season.
We have to adapt to different seasons, don't we?
Totally. And we never really think about that. We're inside most of the time, but we don't really think I should be eating differently. I should be moving differently, maybe engaging in different types of exercise. I should be thinking differently. What time of the year can I do my best work? Or what time of the year is, intense work going to work for me, whether as opposed to something that's a little bit lighter and a little more creative, or whatever it is. So understanding that about yourself means that you stay off this hellish roller coaster ride that we're on throughout the year, from a mental and emotional standpoint, because we're pushing ourselves to be at our best, at our highest and best every day, all the time. And you wake up one day and you think, I can't be at my highest and best today. I can't.
Is that
And there's
okay? Whoever's I'm talking to that's out there, like, no, shouldn't we just be looking after our number one, uno, numero uno? But yet
absolutely.
it's just a society, I think, that we're in, eh?
It is. All of it really is. That's kind of, we've got all those layers of messaging on us that we're just trying to kind of, manage and kind of let go of. And, one thing that you said at the outset was like, I'm 49, I'm still trying to figure it out. I just turned 50 last year. And honestly, like, I think the best thing to embrace about all of this, especially that idea that we're changing constantly, is that this is a lifelong thing.
It
It's
is.
just lifelong. And so if we can move into it with that energy, with that understanding that, like, what am I going to learn today about myself?
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh
curiosity. Yeah,
yes,
curiosity instead of having to have it all worked out, because there's really nothing to work out.
exactly.
It's just an ongoing.
It's just about being and paying attention to that, and then just embracing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's been beautiful. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure we'll converse again, but thank you so much for your time. And I'll leave links and everything for people to get in touch with you. I just love your work, and I can't wait to work with you too, because I think this might be my next adventure into the Ayurvedic world, just going a little bit deeper into this one, because I think this is what I need right now.
Awesome. That's excellent. It's been wonderful, Jay, as always.
Thanks, Chara. Thanks, darling.